You have a crazy background. You are a Navy veteran. You are a medic. You are a welder, a deep sea diver. So, like, how did all of this happen? Like, what came first, the diving or the welding?
So it's kind of a series of failures how I fell into this trade.
Like, it feels like a series of adventures where one thing led to the next.
It kind of did.
Welcome to the Still Building America podcast with your co-host Josh Welton
And Darla Welton. Americans haven't forgotten how to work with our hands. There's a dynamic generation of young fabricators, blacksmiths, machinists, welders, hot rod builders, metal workers, manufacturing entrepreneurs, and artists who are still building America.
Attention marketers and advertisers. Want to reach the manufacturing industry more effectively? Don't miss FMA's free Marketing and Advertising Summit happening June 25th in Elgin, Illinois. Gain exclusive industry insights and network with marketing leaders. Learn from top experts and discover cutting-edge strategies to maximize your brand's impact. Spots are limited. Register now at fmamfg.org.
We are so pumped to have today's guest with us, John Ditkof. As we've gone over your Instagram account and so many of your photos and different things, we're like, John may be the most interesting welder in the world. Yeah.
Interesting man. Like,
I don't know about that. I try to keep things interesting for sure.
I mean, he's a globe-trotting deep sea diver, welder. He's worked all over the world in really unique and challenging, treacherous environments. And he's a Navy veteran. So you have done so many incredible things. And I saw your account, actually. I found you on Instagram back when Josh was working in Alaska in November, December, and I was like, oh, I really want to meet some welders in Alaska. And that was really naive of me because the entire state of Alaska has as many people as live in our city here in Detroit.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and the state is a third of the size of the continental U.S.
I know. I was like,
I think it's actually bigger than that. I know it's at least twice the size of Texas. It's massive.
So big. Like, we were south of Fairbanks, about 100 miles south of Fairbanks, and I saw a little fishing village I thought would be really cool to drive to and visit. It was a 38-hour drive.
Checks out. Yeah. It's I mean, Alaska has a ton to offer, as Josh, as my experience is. Darla, you've been up there. So yeah, it's just insane of all the things you can do and the things you'll experience too and the people you'll meet.
The people are awesome. It was funny because I would go for little drives or whatever, and wherever I stopped, just people wanted to talk because there's not a lot of people to talk to. So I had a lot of interesting conversations, and everyone's super, like, you got to get used to the pace because I'm used to, like, everything's got to happen right now. And we needed, like, fluids for the vehicle. I was out there babysitting a M10 Booker. They were doing cold weather testing. And we were waiting for some fluids, and we're like, we'll probably have them tomorrow. And then, like, 2 weeks later, they showed up. And that's kind of got to get used to it. That's
Alaska time.
It is. There's very much an Alaska time. I was out in Adak, which is the furthest west incorporated town in the United States. We're further west than the Hawaiian Islands. And there used to be the military base. It was shut down back in 97. You could see it out like abandoned spaces. Anyways, at the times, back in 19, there's about 300 people living there. And they gave us a truck for the employer out there, and the wheels, the meshing was actually coming through because the tires were so bald. And we were asking, hey, when are the tires going to show up? Like, you have new tires? And they're like, it might be 6 weeks. We don't know. So what we did, because ADAC is fair game, we started breaking into the old abandoned vehicles to find a car jack and everything. We ended up finding tires that actually fit. We just took them off and we went with it. Yeah, it's like, what are you going to do? You have to. So
it's survivalist country.
Yeah, there's a lot of wilderness up there.
Yeah, it's definitely the survivalist way of life. I did end up actually connecting with, I'm in the middle of writing a story still, but I did connect with the local high school in Delta Junction. They have
Okay.
a crazy, amazing like trades and metals welding
That's awesome.
program.
It's because one guy who just like built it all from the ground up, who's a pilot, fabricator, trades guy, like.
But he grew up in Delta
awesome.
Junction, and he just has a passion for the next generation, you know, of kids growing up there in this very small town.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but they built a boat. And I like the boat was very unusual, so I had him explaining the boat to me, and it was all it was. He's like, Darla, you have to understand, we don't recreational boat in Alaska. We boat for fishing and hunting. It's like survival stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just such a different way of life, and it blew me away. I was just like, okay, cool. So yeah, so I did get to meet some Alaskan and welders, so that was cool. But I also was like, oh, okay, this guy, Deep Sea Medic on Instagram, he's going in my back pocket, because what is this? Like, you have a crazy background. You, like we said, you're a Navy veteran. You are a medic. You are a welder. A deep sea diver. So like, how did all of this happen? Like, what came first, the diving or the welding?
So actually, so it's kind of a series of failures how I fell into this trade. This is another one of those.
I was like, it feels like a series of adventures where one thing led to the next. And
it
you're
kind
like
of did.
A series of failures.
Yeah. So I enlisted in the Navy, kind of start from the beginning at 17. It was my senior year of high school. I had a lot of family that had been in. I'm named after both my grandfathers who were with the Navy in World War II. I had a relative, Storm Normandy. I've had two of my great-grandfathers in the trenches in World War I with the U.S. Expeditionary Force. Even more family before that. And after that, well represented my all branches. And it just kind of made sense, even at a young age, like I would do that. And then obviously with the global war on terror, right? 9/11, Afghanistan, Iraq, like why would I not? And I did. My rating was a torpedo-man. And then I deployed once with my ship. We were off the coast of Iraq protecting the oil platforms, and I was part of my ship's boarding team. So for 2.5 months, we boarded like 130 vessels. So I boarded 62 because we were on two different teams. So about half, and then came back, finished up my career, and I was out. And then went to college, wanted to get into planetary sciences. Geology is my undergrad. After more than a few years in college, it just kind of started spinning my wheels. Got to do some cool stuff with that. But at the end, I left college and got a couple of dead-end jobs. And I was like, now what? Kind of a thing. And I remember a 3D exercise I had in 7th grade doing some stick welding, just doing surface welds. Simplest thing. And I remember it always stuck with me because I decided if I was ever going to get into the trades, I'd want to be a welder. So I was like 12, 13 years old.
Like a shop class or something?
Yeah, just like some very basic, like a metallurgy class or something like that. It was just like, here you go. And the schools I went to, they frowned upon the trades. So they're really, like my high school didn't even have a welder. It was incredibly basic. If you want to be successful, it was still pushed, again, early thousands, 20 years ago more, that you had to go an expensive 4-year college.
Yeah.
And instead, I ended up going to the Navy. But that welding exercise always stuck with me. And then me wanting to go into space and getting involved with that, inevitably I went to space camp. And in high school, they'll throw you in their 27-foot tower, and you throw some torpedoes around doing scuba, and they'll teach you some real quick stuff. And that always stuck with me. So inevitably, as I'm looking at becoming a welder, the underwater welding aspect pops up. And I'm like, what is this? I had never heard of commercial diving before. And decided to go into welding first. It was still would have been paid by my GI Bill from the state of Wisconsin. So
that's great.
Yeah, I decided to absolutely do that. And I saw the success rate for diving was very low. And it was more of, okay, if I do that, I don't want to take on this debt to go to that school. And then in a year, I'm like, this really isn't for me. And then I'm back here in a year of like, okay, now what? So went to school at Waukesha County Technical College in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. Did the 1-year program, graduated with honors, had a job, and I was like, I'm going to go diving. So decided to do that. Went diving. Went to this school in Jacksonville, Florida. Graduated there in December of 15. My first dive job was right after the holidays in 16. And just kind of went from there, bounced between welding and diving, bought my hat. And first time I was up in Alaska was August of 2016. So, and then from there, I went to like New England and then Florida, back to New England to Alaska. I was just bouncing all over the place from then on out. It was wherever I could take a job.
Yeah.
Were you freelancing kind of?
Yeah.
Or I don't know how that industry really works.
So one thing I learned when I was in dive school was the whole idea of a freelance diver. And I never liked the idea of being like at the mercy of an employer, especially for something feast and famine. And I never liked the idea that an employer could take advantage of you. And there never really seemed to be a lot of things you could do. So I like the idea. I just show up for a job, I collect a check, and then I'm out. If you got more work for me, cool. If not, I'm going to go on to the next one.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of how you garner your skills. Because if you're with one company, they only do a few things. So
Gotcha.
You might be really good at those few things. But if you were to leave there, you're going to be kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing all over again. So as a freelance, I feel like I'm a perpetual apprentice because I'm always learning something completely new. See, I dove for 10 different companies. I welded for 6. And then I dug up bombs terrestrially for one other one. So 17 employers in like 7.5 years.
Wait, you dug up bombs?
Wow.
Yeah. So that was one of my specialties too, is UXO.
Not going to let that slip by.
Yeah. So funny thing. In 2017, I met a guy who was going to go to UXO school, and I didn't know what UXO was. And I had been looking for a specialty in diving. And so I started looking at that, and I'm like, holy smokes. So I ended up kind of going that route. In 2018, I signed up, went to Texas A&M for that.
What is that? What is that? You said UXO?
Yeah, it's unexploded ordnance disposal.
Gotcha.
So it's the civilian side of EOD. Doesn't make me an EOD tech by any means. There's a lot less you could do on the civilian side, but the program I went to was 4 weeks, and the first 2 weeks is really just IDing ordnance, safety features. What are you looking at? What makes a frag grenade versus a shell, armor piercing, all that jazz. And then week 3, you start going outside, you set up explosive, you blow things up, and then week 4, you have all your testing.
That's intense.
It's very quick. Like there was a lot of studying involved with that. Because I was damn sure I was not going to fail that one. So I ended up actually graduating second in my class on that one.
Nice.
And then when I had looked at getting into diving before, I had also heard about being a diver medic. And that always intrigues me. And I kind of put that off on the back burner because I needed to learn diving first. So in the fall of 2018, I went out to the school in Leavenworth, Washington for the remote EMT and EMT training. It was a blast. It was absolutely worth being out there for a month, learned a ton. And then I went to the dive school in Seattle for the diver medic course and passed all my certs, all that jazz. And just kind of went from there, just kept hitting the books. To give me a little bit more experience as a diver medic, I ended up actually signed up for a medical trip to Rwanda, Africa. So I did that for a long week in 2019.
What was that like?
And that was really cool. There was 13 of us on that team, and we had 4.5 days of clinic in a remote village outside of the capital of Kigali called Marundi, and we saw 1,040 patients in that time.
Wow.
We saw everything from malaria to STDs or STIs to old wounds that were never treated, broken bones. I mean, you name it, it was insane. Like I had one woman walk in and say, yeah, I'm just feeling lightheaded. Her blood pressure was like 240 over 140.
How is that even possible?
Right. So I was like, you need to go see the doctor. So let me pass you off on that one.
You're like, I'm not the guy for this.
Right. But we ended up there was so much stuff that we saw, like asthma cases, bronchitis. I mean, just everything.
Talk about drinking from a fire hose for your education.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, everybody. And I learned I knew what scabies were, but like everyone had them. And that was big, like treating scabies, treating internal parasites. It was really fascinating. So we got to see some sightseeing while we were there as part of the trip. Obviously with Rwanda and the genocide in 94, got to hit up one of the memorials in Kigali too. So, and I even spent the extra money to stay at Melis Colleen, which is the actual Hotel Rwanda, where like 11 or 1,200 nationals, foreigners, were spared during the genocide.
Yes.
So that was pretty cool. And because it's only a generation removed from that, there was a lot of people we treated, a lot of people I met who were survivors of that too.
Wow. So, incredible experience, like priceless, absolutely priceless. One of those opportunities that kind of helps reshape your worldview, right?
It really did. And it was really worthwhile. I mean, I got a ton of experience on that. I was able to take back and just apply to it as a diver medic and just help out guys that much more, having that real world experience. And actually and before that, I was on a job, Josh, I know you're going to want to hear this one, is when I was out in Martha's Vineyard and I was salvaging that World War II bomber. So underwater UXO, exactly. Right? And I was out there for 2 months and just had a great time out there. We were out in Cape Pogue, and there was a bombing range at Chappaquiddick for the U.S. Navy during World War II, and they lost a number of aircraft. It was the Curtiss Helldiver. And a couple of years prior, they ended up finding one of these aircraft, and I ended up getting on part of that recovery effort. We ended up recovering over 1,800 artifacts that were cataloged by our marine archaeologist. We ended up finding 4 bombs on site, and then I ended up actually finding remains of the crew too. Ooh. So we found all of it. Yeah, we found all of it. We all turned it over to the U.S. Navy. It's their property. But some of the stuff we found, I ended up finding the other 30 cal machine gun. We found some of the props, the hubs, parts, the cylinders for the engine, one of the landing gears.
What was the biggest piece you found?
Honestly, I don't even know what it was. It was just kind of some twisted metal.
You make like a grid and then yeah. Okay.
So we already knew what the grid was and the locations. They had the GPS coordinates, and then we set buoys, and then we made this 5x. So the squares themselves were 10 by 10, but we're also a little limited on the visibility. So just kind of try to figure out where everything was. We made a 5x5 square with notches to it of every foot, so we could get a better idea within the grid of where some of the stuff was found.
Gotcha.
So we would just flip it, clear that 5x5, flip it, etc. So
that's fascinating.
Yeah, it was
amazing experience. Are you a little bit of a history nerd too? So
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, same. That would be thrilling.
Yeah, I had no idea what that project was all going to entail until I'm like in the midst of it, and then we're having our first orientation for it out in Martha's Vineyard, and I'm like, oh, this is completely different than I thought it was. Like, this is
what were you thinking it was going to be?
Well, I knew it was going to be an ordnance clearance because they had to clear this area, and they're like, yeah, there may or may not be this plane. We don't really know. And then they're talking about like, yeah, it could be intact. We don't know. There could be remains. We don't know how many ordnance there's down there. I was like, oh, and what triggered that is they had found some pieces of the aircraft. They found one of the props, and they found one of the machine guns. And I was like, oh, there is this is legit. Okay,
right,
got it. So it had a blast on that job. It was so much fun.
Again, like once in a lifetime experience, opportunity.
It's really great. Like everybody I've worked with or I've talked to, they always have that one job that is the job of their career, based on just everything lined up, the money lined up, the job itself was so cool. I feel like I've got a few of those.
Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, that's definitely one for sure. Like that's never going to happen again for anybody. And I happen to be on it. That was just insane.
Right. Exactly.
So,
well, and I mean, everything that you do is kind of unique, and then you put it all together, and it definitely opens up the doors for having multiple like once in a lifetime stories.
Oh my gosh. It really just has snowballed. Like my first dive job was working for a company out of Pennsylvania, diving on the intakes to power plants. And it was just kind of normal, kind of crappy condition inland diving, just kind of what you see, kind of a lower paying job, nothing glorious. You're never going to weld underwater. You're never going to do all this really cool stuff. And it was just, I wanted to do this, but I wanted to do more. And it just kind of snowballed. Whatever opportunity came around, I tell people, you got to hustle for these things. So like for Antarctica, for example, I found it on Indeed. Wanted Antarctica diver, right?
No way.
So I submitted my resume. But do you know how many thousands of people submitted their resume? A lot, like thousands.
Really?
Oh, yeah. the guys that
I
go
wonder who
through
the
that,
most unqualified person was.
they get a lot of just recreational scuba guys that are just like, yeah, I want to come down. And they were looking for a legitimate commercial diver,
Right.
but they get thousands, right? So what do I do?
Wow.
I called them. And I don't want to say I sweet talked the front office lady, but I was like, hey, I don't know what you're looking for, but this is what I am. This is what I do, my qualifications. What are you looking for? She says, you're exactly what we're looking for. I don't do this, but I'm going to send you over to HR.
Perfect.
So I left a message, but here's the kicker. I couldn't go on that job. There was zero chance I could have made that gig in 6 weeks. I had to refresh my EMT course. I was still out in the Mojave Desert doing this terrestrial gig. I was so bummed that I was not going to be able to make that job.
You got your foot in the door.
Well, and that's just it, right?
Yeah.
And so what happened was I was back in Sandpoint, Alaska, up in the Aleutian Islands, and working on the dive vessel for that company. And before I had left, they had reposted the position. So I resubmitted. The funny thing is I'm up in Sandpoint and I dropped my phone in the water and it shot. Right. So like after a month of not having the phone, I turn it on and I end up getting not only a Facebook message at that day, but also got an email that morning from Steve Rupp saying, hey, man, I saw you reapplied. Wanted to know what's going on and when can we put you to work?
Amazing.
Man, I was on cloud nine.
I bet.
Oh my God. So I ended up, they had a couple of positions open, but I ended up taking the Palmer station gig where they were building the pier and and our job was to weld the anodes underwater to the steel pilings.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, yes, I am absolutely going to go for that. So, and that was going to be at least 6 months out. So I had to do all the medical stuff and the dental. Yeah. You just never know.
Yeah.
Wow. What was your first underwater welding experience?
So outside of school, because they teach you in school, and most people, believe it or not, never wet weld outside of dive school.
Interesting.
It's so commercial diving, you do more inspection and rigging than anything else. In fact,
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So underwater welding constitutes for about 2% of all commercial dive jobs. So there's not many. Right. It's just kind of luck of the draw. I happen to do a lot. My first one was about two years in. It was the summer of 17. So about a year and a half actually in. I was up in Alaska the second time around and I had to do an inspection on a cruise ship. And we had to do an inspection. I had to do an inspection on the bow thrusters. Well, to get through the bow thrusters, I had to cut the grates open. So I had to cut the stainless steel rods. The round stock, we had to save them. I got in, did my inspection, but because we altered them, we had to weld them back together. So that's what we did. We had to set up all the lines and stuff like that. And I had my buddy actually jump in the water to kind of help me out and give me an extra hand. And he was much more proficient than I was at the time. So he was able to give me some pointers of how to actually weld around stainless steel underwater.
I was going to ask you that with the difference between doing a mild steel and doing a stainless steel.
So it's kind of underwater is kind of all the same. But how you weld underwater is not the same as you weld topside.
Right.
In fact, some of the really good habits you have topside actually hinder you underwater. So it's having to learn that, almost unlearn it or make that transition. You have a puddle, but it's really small because everything freezes so fast and you cannot manipulate underwater.
Right.
Yeah. And you're very limited. Like you can't do vertical ups. You can only do vertical down. You can do flat horizontal. And then I've done overhead. And that's about it. And all the welds are brittle. So they can't be for anything structural.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And we use most of the rods I've used are like a 70-14 rod. So it's a rudal rod. But yeah, we had some, I think it was 308 is what we ended up using on that one. But for the rest of it, typically 70-14, I think some 70-13.
That's something I never thought about. That makes sense. So they'd be brittle, but nothing structural. So what's the range of, like you said, welding anodes onto the pier?
Yeah, so most of it's going to be kind of bandage kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Like if your boat ends up with a hole in it, and you just got to put a plate on there, you might be able to get in and patch that up or something like that, and then dewater it. Otherwise. A lot of it's anodes. I've put standoffs for pipes underwater. I've built those for guys to put underwater for me when I was up in Akutan, kind of get the guys a little more proficient with their welding experience. Yeah, might have to weld some nuts on a bolt to make sure things don't back out, or like little weird things like that.
No, that makes sense.
So it's not going to be anything too crazy. Most of what I've done is anode related. For most guys, that's what it is.
Now, how long, because I've always heard, the career expectancy is very short for underwater welding and specifically, but I would imagine that goes for almost all commercial
commercial diving.
So it's, oh man, I have heard it all. You can only live till you're 35. They make 500,000 and
right.
Oh yeah. Right. Would you do this? And I'm like, first of all, I never made so little money. Second of all, right. I've met guys who are in their 50s and 60s get in the water. Is that odd? Yes, that's an outlier. Most guys at that point in time, if they're still in the industry 20 plus years in, they're in a management role. They're not going to be guys. They're not going to be the guys getting in the water.
Right.
Right. There does come a point where it's like you're just the physical labor. You just don't want to do it, and you want to make more money, so you go into management. That's just the reality of it, right? You want to move your career along like anything else. But I mean, I was in the water 7.5 years, and I'm 39, so I've been out for about 2 years now. And yeah, like I know guys who are in their 40s still under a dock, diving, whatever the case is. So it just kind of depends.
Gotcha.
Does it not appeal to you anymore, that sort of work, or what's the story?
So God, man, I think about it all the time. It's more of when I've checked all the boxes. Like having done everything that I have done, right? In my last 2 jobs, I went from Antarctica at McMurdo Station in the dry valleys, and actually having working dives south of the Antarctic Circle. And then 6 months later, from my first dive at Lake Frixell on the continent of Antarctica, one of 40, not even 40 Americans have said that they've done that. I'm going from there in McMurdo, and then 6 months later, I'm finding myself 100 miles north of the Arctic Circle, finishing this out.
That's so dope.
Well, what do you want? Like
what else is there to do?
What is there? I've hit all 50 states. I've set foot on all 7 continents. I've hit all 5 world oceans. To my knowledge, I don't know of any other commercial diver with working dives in both polar regions. I got an offer from the old school that I attended to become a welding instructor. I've got 2 small kids that in 2.5 years, I've been home for maybe 8 months.
Yeah.
Like how much longer do I want to do this for?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it comes down to. So in like teaching, the benefits are fantastic. The health insurance is awesome. Part of I get an old school pension if I stay with this. So it's like, okay, when do I make that transition?
Yeah.
So
that's one of the things with, I talk to people, like I'm big on going into the trades with your eyes open. Like the situation isn't like you're going to come out of school making $100,000. No, if you want to make a lot of money, there's it's not just like, well, I can make, okay, you're working 7/12s or you're traveling all the time. Or it's like, if you're young and don't have a family, frickin' go for it. But man, that life gets hard in awfully quick.
It does. In fact, I got one of my best friends has been just absolutely slamming it all over the world for about 2 years. And he finally gets some time off. Him and his fiance are able to get married. Both are really good friends of mine. And we were all in dive school together. And he's like, I have just needed a break. I'm like, man, I don't know anybody who has just been hitting it as hard as you for the last few years. And so, yeah, it's needed. And in diving, you can't work year round and be okay. Like I was really trying to limit it to about 8 months a year. Okay. Because you just need that break. It's physically demanding all the time.
Mentally demanding too.
Yeah. And I mean, when I was up in Alaska, most guys, if you're in the lower 48, you're not really doing any deep dives. There's some, but for the most part, you're within 30, maybe 40 feet. So decompression isn't a huge worry.
Yeah.
Up in Alaska, we were stopping at 190 feet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, on air. So we were doing air dives to 190. And I mean, like catch a can, diving out of there, you jump off the dock, you're in 100 feet of water. Wow. Like that's what it is. Accutan, I would be at the seawall, be in 20 feet of water. I go out just a couple 100 feet. I'm in 150 feet of water.
Wow.
Like it's nothing. It's very easy to hit those depths. Valdez was another one because we had to do seafloor inspections. It's on a hill. the bottom of that harbor is 1,000 feet or 1,100 feet. Again, we're running on a hill. We stop at 190, and then we start moving back. So, I mean, that's what it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's impressive.
And okay, so, we talk a lot about PPE in the welding and fabrication industry. What's the PPE situation? I mean, you got to stay warm, you got to stay breathing. You've got
So there's a lot of equipment that obviously goes with this, right?
Like imagining all the equipment, like what is going down? Yeah.
It's like the kaijus, or the what do they call them in Pacific Rim, where you have to get in the machine.
The Jaegers.
The Jaegers, yeah.
Oh my
You're
gosh.
basically inside
So
them.
our dive vessel up in Alaska doing the deep dives, man, just even for seafloor surveys, forget doing any trade, anything, just to go down and look at stuff. We had two 600-foot umbilicals that had your air supply, your pneumofathometer, which gauged your depth, communications, and we had lights and camera. And then we had two compressors. One is our main and one is a backup. Then we had 8 K bottles. 6 is a primary, 2 is an emergency backup. Then we also had our bailout bottles that we would wear if we were doing deep dives, like 150, 190.
What's a K bottle?
The K bottles are those really big.
You're talking about size. Oh,
yeah, the K bottles, the really big ones.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so we'd have those, and we got them pressurized and fitted for 5,000 psi. So, and we had an HP compressor. And then we had, for the personal divers, like we would have a bottle on our back, either a 50 or an 80, especially on deep dives. And we might have something on the stage too. God forbid something happens. We always made sure we had enough air for everybody, that drowning or suffocating was not going to be the issue or what kills you.
Good plan.
Yeah, right, absolutely. We had a stage. We would have basically like a boom assembly, so a mini crane, so hoist it, right? We would usually have 6-7 guys on deck. We would usually be in dry suits, because we tried the hot water thing in Alaska, and going almost 200 feet down and 600 feet out, it just wasn't strong enough. It just couldn't keep up with the hot water supply, and dry suits worked fine. I never had an issue with that, honestly, despite what everybody would complain about. I was always fine. But then we also had a recompression chamber, because we had to do all that stuff, because we had a lot of deco that was, for obligation purposes. And then we always have a few bottles of O2, usually 3 or 4 K bottles of O2 that we would use for decompression. Plus comms boxes. We had a built-in rack on the boat. I mean, there's a lot. And that's just getting in the water.
Just getting in the water.
Just getting in the water.
Not to mention doing anything.
Right. That's just getting in the water. So, yeah, usually we take about an hour and a half to 2 hours from stepping off foot of the boat to getting everything set up and getting a guy in the water.
Wow. What's the deepest dive you've done?
190.
190 is it?
Yeah,
wow.
190 is it. Yep.
That's wild, though.
That's all.
Yeah. That's it. So, and my next deepest is 189. My third deepest is 186.
Right on.
So, I've got some deeper ones under my belt.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. I'm sure you see some really interesting sea life.
Yeah, it kind of depends. The deep ones, not so much. I'm sure there's something down there, but I've had interactions with sea otters. I've had interactions with stellar sea lions. I've had interactions with various fish.
How do the sea lions react to you?
Kind of. The female that I had. So we're up in Sandpoint, Alaska, in September of 19, and I was set to burn or so we have what's called exothermic rods, like an oxy lance.
Yeah.
Smaller. We had but that's how we do our flame cutting underwater.
Yeah.
Is an exothermic rod. And anyways, I was setting up to burn out a pipe. And there was the stellar sea lions. Males get to about 2,500 pounds. Females top out about 1,500. Anyways, there was a smaller female. She's about 1,200. Came up probably within 10 feet of me, like right in front, looked at me and then darted off. And then she came back around, came maybe 6 feet off my shoulder. And I didn't even feel her. I just saw her go by and I just laughed. And I'm like, man, that is a bear. And I would what are you going to do for an animal that size?
Nothing.
You're just going to accept your fate. And that's what it is.
We're gonna fight right here.
I just realized like my knives are really small. Like it's not going to do anything. Like I'm completely harmless to these animals. But we never really had an issue. There was a 2,500-pound male Steller sea lion at Sandpoint. He's the resident there. We named him Earl. He would like to come up and say hi to our guys at 60 feet.
Oh.
That would be intimidating. He was never there when I was in the water, but nonetheless, like we saw him all the time, and he always kind of left us alone. But with the other ones too, I've had like been surrounded by ducks at 60 feet. That was really cool. One of the survey dives I had to do in Sandpoint, I was in a swarm of jellyfish. Like it was tens of thousands of like moon jellies and stuff like that. Like shit. It was one of those that you would see in National Geographics. And I got to experience that of just going through and just being part of that. And that was very cool.
You seem like a guy who like not much gets to you. Like you seem like you
not
stay
anymore.
Yeah, not anymore.
I tell everybody at work, look, nobody got hurt, nobody died. Everything else is an inconvenience. Life moves on, kind of a thing. So, and I experienced that because I've had a few close calls. I know guys who have had close calls. I've had friends that have died for various reasons, whether diving related or non-diving related. And I think it's just the older you get, you're just like, it doesn't matter. Like in 10 minutes, this issue right now, it means nothing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
that's interesting.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. Life moves on. It's fine.
Either it does or it doesn't.
Right.
Whatever.
You know what? If life doesn't move on, it's no longer my problem.
Exactly. I like that perspective.
Yeah.
The welding school you're teaching at, is that where you went through in high school?
No.
So school you went to?
So the school I teach at now, WCTC, this is where I went for welding school or training.
Okay.
When I was 28 years old. It's a technical college. We have various programs. Welding and metal fab is just one of the programs, but we offer like machining, and we offer like there's cosmetology and culinary arts and the whole shabam. And the cool thing is my school seems to be doing extremely well because they're looking at adding on performing arts, AI. Nice. We're one of the only colleges right now that offers an associate's degree in AI. So
it's very like STEAM, like a good STEAM program. It sounds like, right?
It is, yeah. And actually, for our program, we partnered up with Lincoln Electric, so we're kind of their test bed facility, their training facility. So they'll bring in vendors and stuff, but we get new welders every 2 years. So they have a whole contract, and I'm like, as a school, you get new welders every 2 years. Why would you not?
No, that's fantastic.
And they're cranking out great machines. So.
Yeah,
it's very, very cool. Oh my gosh, what a great opportunity for the students going through your program.
Right.
If you're getting the latest, greatest welding technology. And I mean, we've seen that develop so quickly over the past 10 years. Over the past 5 years, what's come out is
absolutely insane. And it's ever evolving, like our robots, because we have a whole robotics course too. And like those robots were new 10 years ago, and now look at where the technology has come.
Yeah.
Now Lincoln actually gave us a cobot welder.
Nice. Those are super cool.
Yeah, so we're starting to integrate that.
I think that was the very first cobot we ever tried was a Lincoln cobot.
It?
Yeah, at FabTech, like 2019.
Oh, I just remember using the Miller ones.
Yeah. We used it with Nate Bowman.
Selective memory. Oh yeah, Nate.
Yeah.
You guys would get along. He's a really another guy who is full of adventures. And,
fun.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy too, because a lot of my friends have bounced around. Like I got one of them. She just was one of the test subjects for Artemis over at NASA, and she's been working as a diver. And this is and then her fiance, again, they're getting married in May, and he's been bouncing around the world. I've got other friends still up in Alaska right now. I know people down in Antarctica. It's weird who you meet. And it's just the things, like everybody around me seems to have those adventures as well.
I mean, you're going to the spots where the adventures are happening. Of course,
everybody around you is going to inevitably have those similar stories, right? So that's kind of the fun part about it. So.
Oh, absolutely. So the transition from being world traveling commercial diver to now being back being at home and teaching? Like, what was the transition like for you?
Oh man, that was probably a bigger transition than me getting out of the Navy and getting to civilian life. That took me about 6 months of just really having to figure things out mentally, because I was just, for almost a decade, I was just always on the move, always looking for work. What was the next thing? Always having that kind of stress that goes with it. And all of a sudden it's not there. And it was weird. I really try to look at it as diving's not going anywhere, but my kids are.
So with your students at the technical college now, do you feel like you've inspired any of them to take a similar path?
Or have you warned them not to?
A little bit of A, a little bit of B. I've had some that said, you actually have inspired me to try to do better. Because I really push, like, look, just because you become a welder, want to be a welder, doesn't mean you have to sit in a shop and make terrible wages. And that's what this is. And in fact, I'm an example. And not only am I an example, I attended this very program that you are currently going through. I didn't go to some fancy, expensive college or other tech school out of state. I was right here in these very seats, learning how to weld, just like how you are welding. It's what you do post here is what's going to define your career and whatever limitations you want to put on yourself. I hear all the time, guys look at me and be like, how do I do what you did? Well, this is what I did. This is what I tolerated and was willing to do. Oh, I don't want to do that. Well, I don't know what to tell you, right? There's going to be some give and take. You got to put in the work. For me, I think was really helpful was you got to hit the books more than anything. It's not just, if it's for welding, know more about welding than just pulling a trigger. For me, for diving, especially doing the deep sea stuff, it's more than just putting a hat on. I was usually finding a local sports bar at night, grabbing a beer, I grabbed dinner, and I had the Navy dive manual out, and I would read a chapter every night. Did I retain everything? No, but the fact is I put an hour or two in every night, 5-6 nights a week, over years. That adds up a lot.
Accumulation.
Yeah, and just being able to, every time I reread it, I was like, oh, that now makes sense. I learned something new. So that really helps. And for welding, grab a textbook, grab whatever literature you can find. There's always something new that's out there that's just going to make you better in terms of technique, whatever the case is. So it's always to push yourself.
Yeah, that's great. For me, welding opened a lot of doors. It gets you in the door, and then somebody was joking that like all of us that were, when Instagram first started, everyone was a welder, and then now you watch them; they've all branched off to doing different things. I love welding. I would just do that no matter what forever. But it like this podcast, writing for the Fabricator and the welder, or doing car reviews, becoming just like my whole friend group has changed because welding and everything that comes with it pushed me into, and I was curious. Like, you also have to be curious, so you try different things. That's how the art started, and sculptures and things like that.
Absolutely.
And that takes you in one direction, and the teaching will take you in another direction. And
absolutely. And the other thing too is, like, so I learned MIG, TIG, and flux core. Stick was not offered because the Milwaukee area, no one really uses stick. It's basically it's a dead process here, right? But you know what? My entire background is in stick welding. I had another former instructor who turned diver up in Alaska said, hey, this is how you work 60-11 and how you work 70-18. These are some basic settings based on the rods, and this is how you do structural welds. And then after that, that is, I went with that, and boom, just started burning rods. And I've developed a skill set, right? So it was one of those, you had to be willing to take a step back, kind of be a little humbled of like, okay, yeah, I'm a welder, but I don't know this.
Yeah.
Add more tools to the toolbox.
Exactly. And now I teach stick welding. I teach a lot of the oddball classes at my school, automotive welding, apprentices. I have a couple of stick welding classes that now I get to have some fun with and teach my guys how to seal containers and do pressure tests with and plate and all that. Because I'm like, why not? Let's have some fun with this.
And those skills translate. Like when I worked at Chrysler, I was a millwright and I did a lot of stick welding. And then when I went to General Dynamics Land Systems, we didn't do as much.
Okay.
But when I went to do my certifications, my mil-spec certifications, I was a better stick welder after not having stick welded for like 7 years because like I had just welded more, like not stick welding necessarily, but I just TIG welded more. I pulse welded more, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is easy. Like you fall right back into it and you're actually better because you've got that much more experience, like manipulating different puddles and seeing how metal flows and things like that.
Yeah, it really does.
I love TIG welding, but stick welding is like, there's a smell to it. There's an art to it. I went to Iraq in 2017 just to weld on battle damaged Abrams. A lot of it was because it was stick welding. And so I spent 3 months there just stick welding on tanks. And that was so much fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. That would be a blast, actually.
I was like, that sounds like something you would do, John.
Right. Yeah, it was a unique opportunity that came up during work, and having different skill sets, all of a sudden you're uniquely qualified to do this thing and you jump at the chance.
Yeah, and that's, I think a lot of people don't realize too, that you do these things and there may be like, well, I don't know if I'm really qualified. Like somebody's got to do it, and you might be surprised at what you're actually good at. So it kind of the story with yours. So I was looking at, could I snag a couple of flights during the local winter and go back to McMurdo as a welder during their winter? So it'd be like my summer break. Doesn't quite work out, but you're required to have a 6G cert. And we have a CWI at school. And he's like, I'll give you 2 free tests. That's it. Nice. And he's like, I recommend TIG. You know how to TIG? I'm like, I haven't TIGged in years. Let's try this out. So I ended up making and beveled my own pipe. I had practiced beforehand. Everything looked great. And I did it. And I nailed it. First time up. Are they the prettiest TIG welds? No, they're not. They're not like weld porn, like quality or anything like that. But you know what? I passed. And I got my 6G, and I was so happy with that too. So it kind of goes with that, though. I hadn't welded in years, but with everything else with stick and even pulling, some triggers for wire, like that all helps.
I completely agree. Your mind is in a certain space when you're doing those things.
It is.
You can access different parts of your brain that, like, oh, I saw this when I was doing this kind of welding. Maybe it'll help me in, I don't know. Yeah, I agree. I'm just thinking now, like, I haven't done a 6G in so freaking long. Like, that would be fun to like jump in and see, like, all right, let's see how this goes.
Yeah, and I was actually pretty confident with it because I've welded a decent amount of outfalls up in Alaska, 6-inch, 8-inch, even 10-inch pipe, or I think it's some even bigger stuff too. They just got to 5G positioned or whatever we needed, and you just figure it out. Right. Yeah, and if 100%. It takes you longer, then it takes you longer. That's what a grinder's for.
That's one of the things that I try to get into. I mean, I worked with people who are bad at that, but like getting into kids' heads, like, don't cover up your mistakes because they're going to show up at some point. Like the grinder's there for a reason. If you see something under there, don't keep going over.
Man, and I same thing with new guys. Like, we've all been there. We've all made those mistakes. We've gotten to this point because we've made them. And we figured 100%. Out how to fix them and make those adjustments. So, yeah.
Welding's troubleshooting a lot. Like, whether you're troubleshooting the machine or troubleshooting the process or troubleshooting the outcome of what you're doing. Like, that's all it is.
I still look at, like, some of this stuff or anything I got to weld, and I'm like, all right, how am I going to do this? You just kind of figure it out and you go. And if you mess up, then, well, all right, that's fine. We'll figure it out. Just don't do it that way next time.
Fail differently every time.
Oh my God.
Don't fail the same way.
Here's a fail. Here's a good fail. So when I was down at Palmer, we were welding those anodes, right? And we didn't look at the box of what the polarity is because underwater, we tend to run DCEN because it has to do with the safety of the diver. That if there's a surge in the power, it goes away from you rather than coming back. Well, these rods, and I had heard about these rods before, they were DCEP only. So all our welds looked like absolute trash. And I'm like, wait a minute. I've done this before and I am not this bad. And the other two guys too, were having trouble with it. We're all scratching our head and we figure it out. And we just kept the polarity. We just kept going. Maybe it was something, our angle, we were trying to figure it out. Our welds were getting pretty good, actually, pretty legit. And then we realized we were on the wrong polarity, so we switched it. It was my last die for that job, of course. And man, our welds came out like butter. It's just like, God, man, come on. So
I did that with flux core once on a job. I was helping somebody out they were doing a construction job, and it was like a steel awning. And I got like halfway through, and I'm like, and I don't do a lot of flux core.
Okay.
Like that's probably the most I'd ever done. And I'm like, because usually you have to flip the polarity, and then I finally look at the wire, and I'm like, oh, I've got it reversed. And so for like the last little bit, I did it right. And I was talking to some guy. They're like, it'll be fine. But
oh, it's so frustrating because I was looking at like, what am I doing wrong here? And actually, it was one of those few times that it's really the welding machine, not the welder. So
right.
I love that you are an instructor now, though, because one of the things that we talk to so many different people all over the country, around the world who are welding, or we talk to students who are like, yeah, I graduated from welding school, but they didn't have this, and that. And the welding teacher actually had just graduated from there like the year before. And
it happens a lot.
It happens a lot. And so it's
people
like
with no experience out in the field teaching.
That's rough. The welding education system is not pretty out there.
Oof.
Sounds like you have such a great situation as a teacher, but I also feel really excited for your students because you're out in the field for several years. You've got lots of great adventures and stories, and I would love to be, sitting under your tutelage as a welding student.
What's crazy is so there's 7 full-time welding instructors at my college.
Nice.
I have the least amount of field time of all of them. Everyone else,
that's amazing.
It's, they have been welding for 20 plus years at various companies. And they actually had asked me during my interview, do you have at least 10 years? And I was like, I'm not going to get this job because I had to say no. Because I had graduated in 2015 from this program and it's only 2023. I'm like, it's 8 years. Like, I know.
Look at your records.
Yeah. I was like, here we go. But I gave him a presentation and I was like, here you go. Here's everything I'm laying out for you. Like my resume is 6 pages long with everything I've done. Yes, I've done more than just welding. And no, I'm not sitting in a shop 9 to 5 every day for the last even 10 years or less welding. I've done so many other things, but this is where I've been at. This is what I've done. And I kind of told him, like, if you're looking for a guy who is more in the traditional sense, that's the guy you should go with. Like, I'm not going to be your guy. But if you want somebody who brings a completely different perspective on this whole industry, then yeah, I'm going to be your guy. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's where schools need to get smarter. They need to have, like, you might have a guy with 30 years experience, but he's done the same thing for 30 years.
And that's how I looked at it too. I'm not to discount somebody who's been at a job for 30 years, but yeah, you're only going to learn so much with every company.
It's one of the things I love about doing prototype work is I'm always doing something different.
Oh my God.
It's fun coming in and not knowing exactly what you're going to be working on that day, or, it's troubleshooting. You're looking at something totally new, not something you've done a million times before and trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I've done a little bit of production too, and it's nice for side cash. Not my thing I would want to do as my career. I think that's where the aspect where the field came in. Everything was different. And I think the worst part was we were always limited on tools. So a lot of times we had to make our own stuff on the fly and just figure it out.
MacGyver it.
Yeah. Even so I teach a blueprint class for high school and then I got one for college too. And even though like in the field, we didn't really have blueprints because we didn't know exactly what we were going to make all the time. But the one thing that I always did with my supervisors was we'd sit down and we'd draw it out. What are we looking at? Rather than me just trying to build something, because I may not have all the information. And I always tell guys that too. If you don't understand it, go talk to your guys. If you're in a position like me where you got to make this one-off thing, sit down and draw it with your boss. So you guys are always on the same page. You don't need all the welding symbols, title block, all that jazz, but draw it out. It helps.
Oh, yeah, I have to visualize it, and you've got some idea in your head of what it's supposed to be, and then your boss can also be like, no, I don't want it like that.
Exactly.
I want it like this. You misunderstood.
Yep.
So,
and that clears up so many headaches in the future. So nobody's wasting their time.
So you've been teaching for 2 years. Have you seen any of your students graduate, move on, get a job?
So I actually teach a lot, since I teach a lot of the oddball stuff.
Okay.
I teach a lot of apprentices. So millwrights, mechatronics, they're going through a whole apprenticeship. So these guys they already have jobs. They're coming in, having to learn a little bit of welding and such. And I try to keep it pretty solid for them, knowing they're probably not going to weld in the next 5 years. They might do a one-off weld in 5 years, but I want them to realize, okay, what do I need to look up? I know there's something to this, etc. The only real program students I've had, we have a kind of a metallurgy class, very intro. I've taught that a few times. And then I've got a blueprint and then now a manual thermal class, so teaching torch and plasma for high school students. And I'll teach that at the college level too. And that's been nice. Probably in the next year or so, I'll really start seeing a lot of my students start graduating that I have had. But the high school kids I had graduate last year, this year they'll graduate in May, the ones I had in the fall. So that's kind of nice.
It's a cool feeling. I did a couple of semesters at a local community college teaching. I would love to continue to do it, but it's just not. It wasn't the right situation. The best feeling was this kid, and he stayed after every day trying to, super young guy, like 19, asking me questions. And I spent a lot of time with him because you get a lot of students who are like, oh, they're checked out. I'm not going to bang my head against a wall trying to get them to dig into this. Like, I'll do what I have to do. But if you're checked out, you're on your phone, you're out smoking a cigarette, like I'm more apt to, okay, this kid's been in here busting his ass. At the end of the semester, same thing, stayed with me late, helped me clean up after all the testing and stuff like that. And I just randomly got a message on Facebook like, hey, do you have anybody that I could hire as a production welder for it was TIG welding for like $12. It's super cheap. But he was doing bedpans at a nursing home for $9 an hour. So it was like, hey man, would you be interested in this? And the guy messaged me 2 weeks later. He's like, this kid is awesome. And it's like, that's
what you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we actually have one of our instructors actually does Skills USA and gets yeah. So anyways, for the state of Wisconsin, because everything came out, we just had it this week. He had his students take gold and silver in welding at the college level, gold at the high school student level, bronze for the fabrication team, and then gold for sculpture. So we've got a few students actually going to Atlanta, but they would come in Saturdays, stay after class. I had a couple of them coming in I teach stick welding on Monday nights. I had a couple actually would come in and start practicing during my classes as well. So it was stuff like that. Absolutely. You get students that come in and really try to put in that extra work. It's really nice to see. Even if they don't do well at those competitions, the fact is they've done it, right?
Josh and I judge the state of Michigan Skills USA welding sculpture.
Oh, cool.
Competition.
And it's been really cool to be a part of.
That is cool.
And seeing some of the stuff that these kids come up with is fantastic.
Oh, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. It's like a highlight of the year. I mean, it just seems like they're at another level if given the opportunity. That's such a cool program. I
think it's fantastic.
Yeah, this has been awesome, man.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me.
It's been inspirational, and I think this is gonna blow people's minds. And yeah, I think that I'll probably come back at you with more questions, even if it's on a personal level.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Hit me up, Josh. It's been awesome talking to you guys.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Still Building America podcast. We were thrilled to have that conversation with John Ditkof. So grateful for his time. If you want to follow John, see what he's up to, let's see if he ever does get back in the water, you need to follow him on Instagram at Deep Sea Medic. So that's at DEEPSEAMEDIC. You'll see so many awesome photos from John's adventures as a welder, diver, even as a medic. A lot of times, young people, the first time that they're in a welding class and they hear about underwater welding, they're like, yeah, I want to be an underwater welder. But they don't actually have somebody that they can turn to and say, wow, what is that experience like? How do you go about doing this? What all is involved? But we feel like this episode of the podcast gives you such a clear idea of what that experience is like, what it entails, what it requires. And John did such a great job of opening up that world to us and letting us really see what it's all about. If you're an educator, we encourage you to share this episode with your students. And to all of you, thank you again for listening to this episode of the Still Building America podcast.
Still Building America is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and part of the FMA Podcast Network. The podcast is hosted and created by Darla and Josh Welton. Episodes are produced and edited by Gareth Slager and Darla Welton. Additional production support by Dan Davis, Andy Flando, Dana Weicker, Mike Owens, Billy Culpa, Elizabeth Gavin, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.
holy smokes.